Welcome into K-State Online. I'm Mason Voth. That is Drew Galloway. Drew, you'll be excited to know that I don't know how much longer it will be, but we are in the end game. The basement is being finished as we speak. So I won't have to be in a dungeon or in, the kitchen much longer, which is good news to everybody who doesn't like seeing, me battle the sun or the Christmas tree back there right now or whatever random stuff we just put on this ledge behind me. So that's good news. There's the end in sight for that. We were going to discuss some of the top games of the Chris Kleiman era today, and much like everything over the last week, that's going to get pushed aside because more significant and up to the minute news has dropped, and that is that we have had it come into focus pretty good, the members of the staff that will and won't be retained, certainly more of the guys that aren't going to be back next season that were on the coaching staff this past year. But the most notable one is that you didn't even have to worry about, do we keep Joe Klanderman? Do we not? Because he's decided to take the job that he knew was going to be there for him, and he is going to be the defensive coordinator at Baylor next season, which is, Baylor, obviously their defense was a mess this year. And Joe Klanderman gets a good landing spot with a Big 12 job after Chris Kleiman retires. So good for Joe Klanderman, and Baylor hoping that it works out well for them because, again, the defense was a disaster this season and is kind of what held them back at times.
Yeah, happy for Joe Klanderman to land on his feet. This all actually happened before Colin Klein had even gotten to talk to Joe Klanderman. So this was something that, as soon as Chris Kleiman retired, he was looking for new jobs. And Baylor, in a weird way, your old defensive coordinator leaves to take the same job at North Texas because I think that he was kind of told that he needed to and had an opening, and Joe Klanderman steps in. We'll be interested to see how this all fits. Obviously, K-State doesn't play Baylor next season, so we won't see Joe Klanderman on the opposite sideline, which that would take some getting used to as well. But interested to just see how it fits because Dave Aranda, big-time defensive guy, kind of like Chris Kleiman. But the change here is that what Dave Aranda wants to do defensively is a lot different than what Joe Klanderman wants to do defensively. So I'm interested to see, does this mean Dave Aranda is kind of turning around what he wants to do on defense, or does this mean that Joe Klanderman is going to be the one that has to be flexible and do what Dave Aranda wants? Clearly, what Dave Aranda has wanted on the defensive end for a defensive-minded coach has been pretty awful since he took over. So just interested to see how that all works out. And having him still in the Big 12 is a little bit interesting too, just because there are a lot of teams that are very familiar with what Joe Klanderman likes to do defensively. So how it all works will be fascinating. Baylor next year is going to be one of the bigger wild cards, I think, in the Big 12, like they were this year. And then this year they ended up going 5-7. But it is noteworthy because, this came out even before all of the other stuff about other coaches not being retained.
Yeah, this was one where, I imagine, I think Joe Klanderman was going to be in the running to possibly be the defensive coordinator at K-State, but it wasn't a given, or, people are going back and forth on this already about, should Colin Klein be retaining guys or, bringing in different people and that people get split on it. But I think Klanderman would have been a possibility. Just Colin's obviously got a lot going on, has to evaluate, is this the right move right now? And in some ways you probably want to build out your own thing and you see a vision to where you go, well, if I could do this, I would like to. And so if you're Joe Klanderman and you get an opportunity like Baylor, you can't really sit around and wait for it. They're pretty equal things. And when they're close enough, because I think he would rather have been at K-State than Baylor, but you can't just go, well, I'm gonna wait on the 50-50 job instead of taking the 100% one. I think that's probably what this was. So it's a good opportunity for him. And K-State doesn't play Baylor next year, so you should be hoping that Baylor's defense looks really good. They're going to suck everywhere else. Dave Aranda's going to get fired, and Joe Klanderman's going to get another good job after next year, because despite what people try to suggest, I think he is a pretty good defensive coordinator and good football coach.
There is a chance that is non-zero that Joe Klanderman is the interim head coach at Baylor at some point next season.
Yeah, he might be the head coach for the last 3 games of 2026 for the Bears. We'll see how that ends up going out. So Joe Klanderman, that was kind of the first domino that fell today. But then there are other coaching notes that came out for K-State. Matt Wells not coming back, so we have that. We'll get into that about how some of that's gone down. Brian Anderson not going to be back with the running backs. Really, basically everybody not coming back. Matthew Middleton on receivers, Van Malone with the corners, which we kind of already knew based off of his tweets, and then he deleted them, and then he said he was joking, but it's like, didn't really come across as a joke. Mike Tuiasosopo with the defensive tackles, and then Luke Wells, public enemy number 1, is gone from the tight ends. So I think out of those, you look around, and Brian Anderson, it will be one that hurts fans because of how much success he had with the running backs for K-State. That's one that you probably could have made the case for in some ways. Outside of that, the receiver room really hadn't done a ton until this year. And, I don't know how much you credit Matthew Middleton for that or not. But it was probably one of those that felt fairly expendable. And then everywhere else, like I look around, and some people were going to go to bat for Tui just because the tackles had done some things. But I think this is not meant to be disrespect, but it's a matter of fact in the situation. Uso did good things for K-State. I think maybe one of the more overrated sounds harsh, but in like inflated ideas by fans sometimes of the level of which he played at. And then this year, we saw flashes from Malcolm Alcorn Crowder. I think he, if you retain him, I think that's a really good place next year. And, Damian Ilalio was really good, but I also look at Damian Ilalio and I go, hey, you got the in-city kid that from the time that he was at Manhattan High knew he was a dog and he was going to be able to figure things out. He could have done it without Tui. And again, not disrespect to Tui. I think he did fine once he got guys here, but the real thing was some of these guys hadn't done enough to get guys here. And Colin Klein understands that in this current landscape and era, recruiting is going to be important in this. And you look around, and that's why, I wasn't going to say anything until everything was official because I don't want to, pour on or anything, but if Chris Kleiman was still here, one of the coaching changes that I thought absolutely had to happen this year, it was time for Van Malone to move on. I think when you have these guys that are here for a long time, things get stale. You have to kind of reset in some spots, and you look at the corner development, and there hasn't been a ton of it. Julius Brent's really good. You got him to transfer from Iowa. Jacob Parrish is really the only corner that they ever hit on. And you kind of, it's not all luck. There's some value into doing it and seeing it, but you got a local guy that was pretty under recruited to go into that spot. So I just think you can look around. Nobody that was on the staff was you pound the table. You have to keep them. But you obviously see with guys that we don't know the status of yet, Brian LePack, Buddy Wyatt, and Steve Stannard, that there are some guys that I think are valuable. I think those first 2 guys, probably a decent chance that they are going to be on the next staff in some capacity. And LePack would certainly make a ton of sense because everybody's been playing the clip of Collins celebrating the touchdowns in the Big 12 title game. Who's the guy right next to him in that booth? It's Brian LePack. So the relationship and understanding is there, and LePack had been an up-and-comer. It was a tough year on the offensive line. We'll see where he shakes out, what position he's in charge of, but I would imagine that Brian LePack is going to be on Colin Klein's staff in some capacity.
Yeah, if you look at all the staff members that were no longer retained, the only real somewhat surprise is kind of like what you said with Brian Anderson, that the rest, it kind of felt like it was probably their time and probably time for some of them to move on, even if Chris Kleiman stayed. Like you said, Van Malone, like Luke Wells this year, the tight ends were massively a disappointment.
Well, and like, I mean, we can be honest about the Luke Wells situation. Like, it was when he was hired, it was okay, you can't screw up the tight ends and nobody will care and it doesn't matter because he didn't have the actual merits to be the tight ends coach at K-State this year. So it was trying to find reasons why it made sense other than just, hey, his brother's the OC. But if it didn't work out or things got worse, then it's like, okay, you should be gone. Well, the tight ends very clearly got worse this year. And whether it's because of something Luke Wells did or the fact that his brother's offense didn't set the tight ends up as well, either way, that falls back onto Luke Wells' plate. And like, again, not his fault. If I was sitting here right now and I got offered to go be a Division I football coach, I would take it. I'm not qualified to do it, but I would take it because that'd be dang good money and it'd be a heck of a lot of fun for about a year. And then I'd probably get fired after a year because the tight ends would be dropping a bunch of balls and it would be terrible. So, like, I don't fault Luke Wells for it, but, like, some guys just aren't cut out for this level, and it was clear based off of his background he wasn't cut out for
it. And like, there were too many times that his position group especially, like, ended a drive because it didn't make a block or didn't catch a pass. So, like, that made some sense. Colin being an offensive minded head coach, it's not like a real shock that he would want to bring in his own offensive coordinator because, I mean, if you listen to what Colin Klein has said, he might call the plays as the head coach. So like it would make sense that he'd want to bring in his own OC. Defensively, like Tui kind of just was what he was and Van was what he was. And I don't think that you're necessarily like going to downgrade from them. I think that they both did some things in their own way that sometimes it worked out and sometimes it didn't. And more times than not, it worked out at defensive tackle, but not always at corner. Matthew Middleton, you can probably do better. He's the best wide receivers coach that K-State has had in the last 8 years. But does that mean that he is the best that K-State can do? Probably not. But it does make things very interesting. I mean, we expected a lot of staff turnover. Now that there's more staff turnover, that means that there's probably going to be more player turnover in the next handful of days. But yeah, I mean, it kind of is what it is when there's a major coaching change. You want to bring in your own guys. And, I think that there are more people that would be upset if there wasn't this much turnover going on than there is. And this also doesn't mean that these coaches didn't have like good things. There's a lot of revisionist history, especially around like Brian Anderson, where people are calling him overrated or like not good enough. And it's like, no, he will probably find a job as well pretty soon. But like, you don't have to be like, oh no, get rid of them all. They all suck. Like, no, they all had moments where they were really, really good and did it with players that we didn't really expect. Like nobody expected when he signed DJ Giddens to be one of the better players in K-State history. You could say that like Eli Huggins, his development went crazy for Mike Tuiasosopo. Like there were so many things that like they all did well at certain points, but they didn't all do them consistently. And I mean, this is just kind of where college football and college sports are right now, is that we've talked about this a little bit. None of the guys outside of Matthew Middleton are particularly young. Mm-hmm. And that is kind of a thing of where college football and college football staffs are going.
Yeah. And it's a good point, and people should remember it. Like, number one, this is a young man's game, or at least a game where you have to be able to relate to these guys in one of two ways. So it's either, they feel like there is some connection or understanding that you have for them in a significant way. And like, that's going to be the value of Colin Klein, is that he's in his mid-30s and he can say, within the last 15 years, I was playing just like you, and I was a Heisman Trophy finalist, and we won the Big 12 and all of this. And there's just an enthusiasm and effort. And like, that's part of, like the Chris Kleiman burnout that led to this, that, Gene Taylor said pissed him off and everything about where college football is. Like, it takes if you've been doing this for 20 plus years or more, like a lot of these guys have, it would absolutely suck because things were one way for so long. There were some significant but not major changes that you adjusted to, and you're like, okay, we got that figured out. And then in the last 3, 4, 5 years, this thing has completely been flipped on its head, and you're scrambling. We talked about there are times when I talk to my brother, who's only 6 years younger than me, that he'll say things or mention things that I've got zero idea of. And like normally, like I would have thought, oh, I can keep up with that. Like if I sit down and I take a little bit, I can figure stuff out. I can still go through all this and I still have something in me. But like you just relative to what you're involved in, there's a benefit to it. And then that's why it comes to like having a reset of ideas is helpful, because a lot of these coaches are going to be able to go find another job and be valuable to whatever situation they arrive in, because that staff is needing new ideas or a new perspective on things or a new approach. And K-State just, for 7 years had a lot of the same. And you look at so many different industries in sports, marriages don't last that long in a lot of ways. Like hitting and pitching coaches in Major League Baseball, they turn over like every couple of years. Most head coaches don't last 7 years in these sports. So like that's part of this too, where everything needs to kind of get refreshed, because if you keep throwing the same ideas out there, then you're either dominating everybody, but when things change as much as they have, you have to kind of go through and reset some things and some ideas, which I would also point out, people will not like this comparison in some ways, but one of the people that seemed a little, and I know that people have their theories and everything, but seemed a little overmatched with the changes that had gone on in college sports, was like, look at Bill Self at Kansas. And when all this really skyrocketed with NIL and transfer portal stuff, Kansas had to go through a little bit of an adjustment period, and they weren't winning. After they won that national title, they hadn't won an NCAA tournament game. They only won one in that stretch. Now you see after a couple years, they're starting to get it back and figured out right now. And you look at the coaching staff and you see there has been some significant overturn relative to what Bill Self's staff typically looks like at Kansas, because he's not losing a ton of guys to head coaching opportunities ever. But there are a lot of guys that have been on that bench for a long time that aren't there anymore. Norm Roberts, not there anymore. Fred Quarterbaum, not there anymore. Like they have had some serious overturn, and they're playing, some of their better basketball. I know they lost some early ones and they got kind of kicked down, but like I think they're going to be pretty good this year, and we're seeing that. So even like the guys at the top have to get this reset. Nick Saban benefited from it because he was losing guys to being head coaches, so he had no choice but to go out and reset his staff. But it's beneficial to do that. And the last thing that I will say on this is that, unfortunately, this shouldn't be a personal thing to a lot of these guys, but I get the vibe based off some of the reaction that's been out there that it is being taken personally. And that doesn't really sit well with me, especially when it's a guy that like they worked with for a handful of years, and they should owe him some respect and be handling it a little bit better.
Yeah, because it's not a personal thing. Because I mean, if it was a personal thing, I don't think that Colin Klein would have met with all of the coaches, and
they would have been gone on Saturday instead of today.
So like how he went about it was very good and very professional, and now it just leads to more of what's going to happen with the coaching spots that are available. And we've kind of touched on this a little bit with Brian LePack, Buddy White, Steve Standard. There's not guaranteed to be on K-State staff, but I think that it is probably a little bit more likely that Brian LePack and Buddy White are. And those are two coaches that beforehand I probably would have gone to bat to stay on this coaching staff in some sort of capacity, because like I said before, like you need to have some kind of familiar face for all of the players to see. So LePack and Wyatt both make sense to me. LePack is an up-and-comer. Buddy Wyatt, all he's done in his 7 years is have Defensive Lineman of the Year 3 times. So he's doing something right. And I mean, they had some ups and downs this year, but K-State still ended up, I think, in conference games only, K-State was still second in sacks this year. So I mean, he's doing something right.
Yeah, I mean Toby Osensami was playing well until his injury, and some other guys stepped up in there. So we'll see. And yeah, I think if Lepak and Wyatt, certainly if they are retained, I think that's not a problem for K State for different reasons. But I think it'll benefit them, and we'll have some more clarity on what's coming next for K State and Colin Klein's staff to build around everybody else that is left. The last thing we have to talk about here, and I don't want to put this on Matt Wells because he can't control these guys. But I would just maybe get a little bit of control on Henry Colombi's Twitter usage, who is just losing his mind right now about K-State getting rid of Matt Wells and fighting K-State fans on Twitter, which is kind of insane to watch unfold.
It's just bizarre because he played at Texas Tech, played at Utah State, transferred to Texas Tech with Matt Wells, and is like fighting K-State fans for whatever reason, then calling K-State a poverty program when he went 0-2 against K-State and had 2 touchdowns and 2 interceptions in the 2 games total. So like it's just weird because he says that like K-State fans are weird because they're going after him and acting like they're on the staff, but Henry Colombi was like nowhere near K-State, but is acting like he knows a lot.
Yeah, so what this stems from is Pete Thamel's tweet earlier today about, hey, we didn't we know K-State's not going to bring back Matt Wells. So he posts the tweet. Henry Colombi replies, an offense that averaged 30 points per game, 47 on the road versus Utah in a loss. Yeah, I'm sure the defense wasn't the issue. Hope K-State finishes last in the Big 12 for years to come. Garbage program is what he said. So here's the deal. I know from other interactions, because I saw other fan bases going after Colombi throughout the season, that he gets into a lot of these Twitter wars. Like he is Texas Tech till I die, unless the death is you don't want to play there anymore and you go to Marshall for a year instead of using your last year of eligibility. But he's a Tech guy through and through, and gets into these all of the time. So he has been going at it with K-State fans today after that tweet, because K-State fans rightfully going after him and getting on him, which, by the way, I didn't even notice this until now. Did you realize that Henry Colombi, his bio on Twitter is former QB, Red Raider alum? Okay, 2 things that are accurate. Do you know the last thing in his Twitter bio, Drew?
Does it say that he was all Big 12?
Yes, 2020, 2021, all Big 12. Well, it wasn't for his playing merits. It was the academic all Big 12 that basically every one of these guys gets at some point, because it's how this thing works. So nobody has ever considered academic all Big 12 a legitimate all Big 12 award. Like, what you're doing if you're Henry Colombi. This is like, I listened to a lot of Ryan Russillo, and there was a guy that had emailed in a few years ago on life advice, and he played at Texas A&M Corpus Christi, but he wasn't correcting people when they would just say that he played at Texas A&M. And like, that's what this is, where yes, Henry Colombi was all Big 12, but academic all Big 12. And it feels like there's a pretty big difference between the all Big 12 teams that Colin Klein was on versus Henry Colombi. So we have that to start with.
Well, it's also just weird that he makes sure to point out how Matt Wells did in the Utah game and pointing out the defense, but said like nothing when people have said that Joe Klanderman has left to be the defensive coordinator at Baylor. Like the whole thing is just weird. Like, I get that Matt Wells is Henry Colombi's guy, but it is a little bit weird to air out publicly and then call K-State a garbage program when he was 0-2 against K-State in his career. And this is not Matt Wells' fault. But the Henry Colombi, I haven't even thought about Henry Colombi since I saw K-State win in hilarious fashion in Lubbock in 2021. So for him to be the one talking trash is what's funny about it, I think.
Yeah, it's just and like I get it. You're going to bat for these guys and all this stuff. Cuz like, these coaches are special, these guys, but like this is where the proof comes in that like players don't necessarily like have the best feel of things because they are very emotional in it, and like they can't see the forest through the trees. It's like, well, you can like somebody, but also like if they're not doing their job properly, then like you have to be able to realize that too. I mean, he's just been replying all day to K-State fans on there and calling K-State a poverty program when it's like this. And this is the thing about Tech fans. Like, I like Lubbock. I like a lot of Tech fans. I absolutely hate how they have handled the last 3 months of fandom, because they act like all of a sudden, oh yeah, we've always been this. Tech's always been this machine. You told us we weren't, but we are. It's like, just be on. And this makes sense why Henry Colombi's not, because he's telling everybody he was all Big 12 and he wasn't. But like, just be honest about why you're doing this right now. And it's the money thing. Like, congrats to you. You are playing the game properly in 2025. But to me, like, you have to realize these guys are coming to Lubbock now because you can pay them. Doesn't mean they won't fall in love with Lubbock once they get there, because Henry Colombi did, started at Utah State with Matt Wells, ends up at Texas Tech, obviously very much loves it. But he didn't go to Texas Tech because he loved Lubbock. He went to Texas Tech because he loved Matt Wells. And these guys that are going there now, they don't love Lubbock. They love the money. They get there and they fall in love with Texas Tech. Like, Baron Morton's going to be a Tech guy through and through. And the hired guns, David Bailey is going to be a Tech guy through and through. You don't have, it's not a shameful thing, but acting like all of a sudden, K-State just had their worst year in X amount of years. And now Tech fans are trying to come in and say, oh yeah, poverty program, because, our money all of a sudden took us out of being a poverty program for the last 15 years. Like that. And this is just the marriage of a bunch of things that have frustrated me about this season, where the way Tech fans can't be upfront about why this is happening. They have to try to act like it's some other reason. And then obviously today, Henry Colombi going after K-State and acting like K-State and Colin Klein have mistreated Matt Wells, and that the offense wasn't a problem this year for K-State. It was a problem this year for K-State, and Matt Wells had one of the worst performances of a K-State OC under Chris Klieman.
Yeah, sometimes it's better to know your role and just do nothing. And like Henry Colombi could have just done nothing today and maybe like message Matt Wells in private about it instead of like airing it out for everybody to see, because instead he just kind of looks like a dumb person because he's going after K-State fans for no real reason and K-State for no real reason. Because also, like, you got to have some situational awareness. Like, very rarely does a coach come in and keep the offensive coordinator or defensive coordinator that was already there. Like, that's just how it goes.
Also, in some of the replies, Henry Colombi is blaming Avery Johnson for this. Does Henry Colombi know who the quarterback's coach was the last 2 years? When people, year one, everybody thought Avery Johnson was still going to be what they wanted him to be. The last 2 years, there have been a few questions raised. Who was his quarterback's coach year one versus the last two? I would bring that up as well. But yes, like that, it's just, and I should be up front here. Maybe even worse than saying all Big 12 because of the academic side. I hate when sports info departments do this. Henry Colombi got honorable mention all Big 12 in 2020 for offensive newcomer of the year. So I guess he was on the list, but again, nobody actually recognizes that as an offensive. And I'm not trying to run Henry Colombi down. Like, you played Division I football, you did it, you were good enough to, like, nobody should take that away from you. And I was a Colombi defender because I was like, some of these people are being really harsh to him. Like, I get why the dude went to Marshall, all this other stuff, but now I see why they came at him so much. And it's because he's being an absolute fool on social media about this. And we know that the one thing that I don't stand for very well is when people start attacking my alma mater and trying to blame them for all of this stuff when it's very clear that like other things are the problem and you're not going to attack my school and the place that's important to me about this, because it's one thing if it's people going after Texas Tech or whatever, but like it's just Matt Wells was not very good this year. He had to move on. And again, like you said, Drew, Colin Klein is one of the best offensive coordinators in college football right now. So he's going to come in, he's going to have his own offensive philosophy. So he wants to build his own offensive staff. And then on top of that, he's going to, want to build this out and probably do things a little bit differently. So it would have been redundant to have Matt Wells, and it would have been demeaning to Matt Wells because his role would have been significantly decreased this year.
Again, this isn't a Matt Wells thing, but did you see that Henry Colombi doesn't want Matt Wells to be the Texas Tech offensive coordinator?
Yeah. I mean, interesting.
That's weird how that works, isn't it?
Yeah, you would be wanting to scoop him back up.
Like,
so
I feel bad for Matt Wells because this is going to sour some people about how they feel about him because of what Colombi is saying. And that's just a little, it shouldn't go hand in hand, but that it is just a weird thing to go to bat so hard for this. And then somebody say, well, Texas Tech should hire him. And then he says, no. Like, it just doesn't make a lot of sense to me.
Yeah. So I look at this and I think it's ridiculous the way that it's being handled here. And I just, I had to bring people's attention to it and call it out because K-State was well within their right to do this. You can go and look at how the K-State offense worked out this year. It was underwhelming. It underperformed in a lot of areas. And for various reasons, that's on, different people involved, but Matt Wells was in charge of the offense. K-State, he also was trying to say, hey, look, K-State scored 30 points per game this year. That also a lie. K-State averaged 29.4. You would round down since it's under the 0.5, you would round it up. So they were actually closer to 29 points a game, which was 8th in the Big 12. That was middle of the pack. So, whatever. The defense allowed less than what the offense was scoring. So it's not like that was really the issue there. We also have eyeballs. We saw a team score only 14 points against the worst defense in the Big 12 this year. We saw a team against the second or third worst team in the Big 12 only score 24 against Colorado or whatever it ended up being. And then, obviously K-State running the football was lacking in some ways this season. And, the pass defense was 14th in the Big 12, which last I checked, that's a pretty big part of quarterbacks. And again, Matt Wells was the quarterbacks coach. And this is not meant to be, I'm not trying to run Matt Wells down here, but his boy is bringing this on him when you have to discuss this stuff, and it's a problem. So, yeah.
We also have some breaking news as we're recording, because this is how it goes sometimes. Trey Scott officially named general manager of K-State.
All right. There you go. So that is big news that had been alluded to on the board earlier this week, but K-State's GM is official. The background on Trey Scott, he was on the team, crossed over with Colin Klein at 09, 2010, that turn of things. And then once he left K-State, eventually got into the NFL world and was in the front office with the Redskins and then the Raiders. And then after about 10 years with the Raiders, moved to the side and ended up in the agent world representing coaches and players. And now the Kansas City native is going to be the general manager for Colin Klein and K-State.
He has done like a little bit of everything, and that's what you want from a general manager in college football at this stage of the game. Working in the front office, like you said, as an agent for players and coaches, has space in the NIL world, has space in the salary cap world, and the NFL world. And this is about as good as you could possibly do for a GM in this day and age. Like, again, super young. I didn't realize, and I'm curious if you had realized who he was at the time that he played at K-State. Like the name did not sound familiar to me at all.
Yeah, no, I had no idea until I just kind of like getting into it, and you go, oh, okay, he played at K State. I guess that's something that happened. I didn't know that he was on the roster in any
Mill
way.
Mill Valley alum, I believe. So
Well, that never hurts, and we're gonna see the balance for K State and the guys that like they're I think going to be enough ties to the area locally and obviously the program for somebody like Trey Scott. So this is I think this is a good thing for K State because you can go through and look to see just kind of how he was viewed when he was in the NFL still, and like you
yeah,
can
I mean, he
find
went.
the story when he was done with the Raiders, like he was in consideration to possibly be on the track to become a general manager in the NFL one day. And then in this day and age, I don't think it hurts to have the background on obviously the NFL side, but more than anything, now he was an agent. So you have a little bit of that background to go on.
I believe when he was working with the Raiders, he went through 3 different GMs. So like enough people liked him to keep him around the whole time. So
Yeah. That's a pretty good sign because it's not always a given that when a new head honcho comes in that he retains a lot of the same staff. It's
no.
pretty typical actually that somebody new gets hired, they reset with their own staff that they've assembled. They don't keep the old guys that were hanging around in. So that's maybe a lesson that Henry Colombi could learn.
Also, makes a lot of sense that this would be the first one to be official with the portal opening up January 2nd and players going in it every day.
Yeah, and I mean, for a lot of these teams, people have to remember that when a coaching change happens, the portal window already opens up for those guys for an extended period of time. So there are enough guys with as much changes that are happening in college football that, like for K-State last week when Chris Kleiman retired, the portal opened for I think it's 15 days. So there's going to be a couple days where it closes and then reopens, but Michigan now, all those players, portal is officially open if you're at Michigan. Oklahoma State, well, theirs is actually been closed for a while now because of how things ended up working out.
Which is why if you read into what people think nationally, the portal opens on January 2nd, and a lot of folks think that there will be a rush of commits on January 2nd.
Yep. Yeah, and I mean with like the agent stuff that you can kind of work around the actual talking to these guys. You can talk to other people and work your way around it all. But K-State, that's good to get that in right before we finish up today. That Trey Scott, the first official member of the staff, there should be more of those announcement coming in the near future for K-State. So
at least one more. I wouldn't be surprised if it was announced by the end of the weekend because he's already there.
Yeah, or sooner. Some of these guys, you go and do some sleuthing, and their old schools don't have their profiles up anymore, so that might be able to tell you a thing or two.
That is true.
Yeah, so a lot of 404s not found while I was trying to get some things written. Anyways, we'll get out of here. Everybody, if you want to have some fun and you got time, go check out Henry Colombi's Twitter. You'll have a good time there discussing college football with a former All Big 12 performer. So there you go. For Drew Galloway, I'm Mason Voth. Thanks for watching and listening to the KSO show. We will talk to you again tomorrow.